Many people believed that the only son that the notorious Tudor King Henry VIII had was Edward VI, the male heir and successor that he greatly wished for. However, there was a son born of Henry VIII's mistress that the king treated like his successor and heir years before Edward VI was born. Henry is remembered for being the infamous six-wived king, with two of them being executed inside the walls of the Tower of London, and his drive for this male heir and successor led him through marital turmoil. However, the king had produced an illegitimate son who was given the name Henry after his father, and the surname Fitzroy, being son of a king. Henry Fitzroy was being prepared for being a possible king, and there were even shocking considerations made to marry him to his half-sister. However, he died at a young age, under rather strange but tragic circumstances. Henry Fitzroy was born in the June of 1519, and he was the son of King Henry VIII and his mistress, Elizabeth Bessie Blount. His mother was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon, and the king had an affair with Bessie whilst he was married to Catherine, and the child, it's believed, was conceived when Catherine was even pregnant. She was approaching her confinement period, and she gave birth to a tragic stillborn daughter. But Bessie Blount was described as a beautiful and skilled young woman who was a dancer and talented musician. But she soon became the king's mistress, and during her pregnancy she was sent away to a priory to be cared for by nuns, as to not upset the queen, as Henry's mistress was pregnant. But when Bessie gave birth, Henry VIII was informed that he now had a son, and despite the boy being illegitimate, the king was incredibly happy, and he visited the child a number of times, despite the fact Bessie would never come back to court as to avoid a huge scandal. But everyone knew that the king had an illegitimate son, and Henry took great pride in this, and he arranged his son's christening, and Cardinal Wolsey was part of this, and he was named Fitzroy's godfather, showing how high status this son was. Henry then decided to show his son off to everyone at court and in his household, and unlike many other kings of England, he acknowledged this illegitimate child as his own, and he was incredibly proud. But Fitzroy would then have an affluent and high-status upbringing as the son of the king. He joined the royal nursery, and he was also at court. Henry VIII visited him a lot, despite the fact he had his own household, and at the age of 6, Fitzroy became a Knight of the Garter, an honour bestowed upon him by his father the king, and he was also made the Duke of Richmond and the Duke of Somerset, as well as being declared the Earl of Nottingham. This took place in a huge ceremony, and knights accompanied him through the procession, but it was the first time in 4 centuries that an illegitimate child had been made a peer of the realm and a duke. There were huge ceremonies to celebrate, and it showed that Henry VIII had big plans for Fitzroy, and he loved him greatly. But because of this, it's believed by many historians that Henry VIII was preparing Fitzroy to possibly one day be his successor and heir to the throne. The title the Earl of Richmond had been held by his father Henry VII and his grandfather, and the king gave the child this to strengthen his claim to the throne and his links to great Tudor figures of the past. He was being raised like a royal prince, and he was said to have been a most handsome, urban and learned young gentleman, very dear to the king on account of his good manners. And those who saw Fitzroy claimed that he looked very similar to his father. He was then, in the June of 1529, despite being around the age of 10, made the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, and he was even being considered being crowned the King of Ireland. However, the question as to who Henry Fitzroy would marry was an interesting one. With a marriage, Henry VIII could have strengthened his links to the throne and made him a powerhouse to be reckoned with as an heir, binding him to other European dynasties or important English noble families. There were many questions about this, and one shocking suggestion Henry VIII had was to marry his son to his daughter, the future Mary I, or Bloody Mary. But this would have created a lot of Tudor royal inbreeding. But Henry VIII liked the idea, and he even got consent from the Pope, who agreed to this about the 2 half-siblings being married. But at the age of 14, with the involvement of Henry's second wife Anne Boleyn, Henry Fitzroy was married to Mary Howard, the daughter of Thomas Howard, the 3rd Duke of Norfolk. This strengthened Anne Boleyn's links to the throne also, and her family's links, and Anne would gain more favour with the Duke of Norfolk for this. At their young age, the marriage was never consummated, but Fitzroy's career as a courtier and royal prince was almost flourishing. He would even be inside the walls of the Tower of London to watch the execution of Anne Boleyn, and Fitzroy may have been sent by his father to watch this to toughen him up for the future of being a king. He saw the French swordsman strike the head off his stepmother, but despite all the honours bestowed upon him, he was a very sickly child, it's believed. In the months before he died, Henry Fitzroy had become sick for a brief period with consumption or tuberculosis, as it's believed to be today. He had a number of problems with his lungs, and he was coughing up all manner of nasty things. But despite having a number of public appearances, he did not get better, and Henry VIII began to get rather upset, as he dreamt of having a healthy successor to be on the throne who was a man, but his illegitimate son was now very ill. On the 22nd of July 1536, Henry Fitzroy died inside of St James's Palace. In his final days he'd been made comfortable, and the royal doctors who were sent by the king looked after him, but there was no recovery. There were many beliefs put forward about his death over the years, including a consideration that Henry Fitzroy may have died from the same condition that affected his uncle Prince Arthur, the older brother of Henry VIII. They both suffered with sweating, sickness and coughing, as well as issues with their lungs. Arthur died also at a young age, and was the heir apparent, and they may have both had a genetic condition that weakened their lungs and led to their early deaths. Also there was a nasty bout of the pneumonic plague sweeping across England at this time, and Henry Fitzroy may have got this, and is considered as he was buried very quickly, presumably to avoid further spread of the illness. Henry VIII was gutted and was greatly upset by the loss of his illegitimate son, and the Duke of Norfolk took control of the funeral procession. There was no state funeral, and he was buried inside of St Michael's Church in the village of Framlingham in Suffolk, and his wife, Mary Howard, would later be buried in the same tomb. But Henry Fitzroy was just 17 when he died. His death is one that is a strange one, considering the plans that Henry VIII had for him. If history could have been very different, then Fitzroy could have been the future King Henry IX, but his early death would break the heart of his father, as he saw him as his son, regardless of his legitimacy. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.